I have a bit of a personal kind of challenge with this subject. That's why I wanted to really pick it up. So I see my job as being marketing. Fundamentally, that's what I've always done. Development and marketing stuff. Always in this space. But it's interesting that in my head, marketing is something, and I think in many people's heads, in fact, and in many other sectors, marketing is a holistic approach to fundamentally working a business into doing the best thing for the market, frankly. It's not necessarily just promotions. And I think that it's a real key challenge, actually, in terms of the kind of, I suppose, the branding of marketing as a word. And it's one of the things I wanted to talk about today is really the evolution of marketing for restaurants and what that looks like. Certainly within my career, I've been called the colouring in department, amongst many other things. And I'm sure a number of you understand that. We're an operator-focused sector, mainly, and traditionally it's mainly been operators that have taken senior roles as being MDs and CEOs. Interestingly, though, in recent years, we've seen a much larger number of people from a marketing and I suppose the thinking background coming to the forefront in senior roles in the UK, and I think that's something that we'll see come across over the next wee while globally. In fact, it's quite interesting that of the FTSE 250 in the UK, it was over 30% of all of the CEOs and MDs are from a marketing background. So I really wanted to understand what that looks like in terms of the marketing, the restaurant sector and the sector that we all work in. So I suppose first of all to our panel, maybe to you, Lisa, first. Do you kind of concur with some of those points about the colouring in department?
Yes, I've been called many things, including basket weaving. I think there's a big difference between the people in the marketing team that actually create the collateral. An operations team cannot deliver to their customers without actually having a menu, without having the dishes on the menu, and somebody looking at the pricing and looking at the competitors. But actually, in terms of putting discounts together or promotions, what happens if all of your competitors in the high street are also running the same promotion as you? You absolutely need a difference. You need a point of differentiation. And I think that's where actually marketing, in terms of helping to drive the vision and what is the strategy and why is your brand different. So if I could go into Pizza Express, if I could go into Zzz's, if I could go into Bill's, and I could get 50% off, and actually the average spend per head, the average cost of a meal is roughly the same. As a consumer, I need to know what I'm going to get in each of those different restaurants. And I think that's where the colouring in department, as we say, so that the people that actually create the collateral and are doing the spell checking and are thinking about the lovely creative wording, they need direction. And they need to know, you can put a logo to differentiate your menu, and you can have some different dishes, but actually what is the consumer going to get? So how are they going to feel? And how are we going to direct the training team? How is their service going to be different? And I think that's where strategic marketing comes in more, because it's all about the why. It's not just about an operator saying, can you create me a poster that says you're going to get 2 for 1 today? There's actually got to be something deeper, and it's about what's going to be different about your experience.
I think that's the real point, isn't it? It's that why, and actually it's interesting that, to me, you've got to question where that comes from on your business. And if it isn't the marketing team and a marketing leader, then is it your CEO? In an entrepreneurial business, I think that's very common that that's the case. But I think when you get into a corporate environment, that's when those challenges start coming up more. And I think that's one of the key challenges. Coming from more of a holistic viewpoint, what's your view, Elmar?
Yeah, I mean, the core of a successful marketing initiative is that as an entrepreneur getting into a restaurant business, you really start to formulate the story of the restaurant correctly. Its values, what makes you different, like what you said, and that you formulate before you actually start to go into a branding exercise, what that restaurant wants to be, what the different touch points are. A restaurant will only be successful if you manage to trigger all the different human senses in a positive way throughout the whole guest journey. That needs to be clearly defined when you write the story book of the concept that then can be communicated to all the stakeholders and all the different parties, like the marketing team, the branding guys. And we just went through this exercise now on a couple of occasions with different concepts that we've done. And it's if you haven't thought about it and if you haven't written about it in the outset, you don't really have anything tangible to tell. So it's important that you formulate the idea correctly in the beginning, and then involve all the different stakeholders in the process, and work out the real soul and essence of what you want to be.
I think that whole piece about experiences, and I know it's come up a lot over the last couple of days, but I think, to be frank, experiences don't just happen. They are designed, and I think it's the designing of that experience and owning that whole customer journey that's really, really integral here. Yes. One of the things I think we see a lot in particularly the hotel sector is it's a very very real estate focused environment. So we have a square box, and we need something to fit that square box. And actually what normally happens is the development of a concept. But actually, to me, there's a fundamental difference between a concept and a brand. And a concept is something that may work within that one establishment. It may tick all the boxes in terms of even being very commercially successful in an establishment. But what's the depth to that? And I think that a lot of the work that I end up doing with people, that when they get to 3, 4, 5 sites, ideally it will be done pre-site 1 or at site 1, but unfortunately it doesn't normally happen. It's a retrospective thing. Is coming in and going, okay, well, what actually matters to our customers beyond the experience? And I think that's what powers what we talked about earlier, this kind of online and offline communication piece, and a kind of a broader holistic connection with the brand. Needs messaging. It needs something that means something. And I think increasingly, and again, I don't want to kind of dwell too much on the millennial thing, but what we are seeing is younger generations caring more about their own self-image, their own self-brand, and needing something to mean something to the broader world. And actually that's really important in terms of the way we operate. When I ask millennials brands that they feel linked to in some way, Airbnb is one that comes up a lot. And I think within the hotel space, people spit at that and kind of, blah, blah, blah. And you think, well, actually, realistically, the reason they connect with it is that they are connecting on an emotional level with a brand that means something. And there's very few restaurant groups that I think do that particularly well. I think a lot of people do that retrospectively, and I think it then also very readily, without very clear strategic guidance, falls back to an operator's viewpoint. I think very briefly on that, Lisa and I talked earlier on this morning about that whole piece of actually you leave an operations team to something for even a matter of, I'm not going to say days, but weeks or months, and suddenly you go back to a venue and things can be completely different.
Yeah, I think we're working on a project with Heathrow Airport at the moment, and I've not been involved in the project for a while, and operationally, the restaurant, it looks beautiful, it works very well. There's a clear flow of where you get the coffee from and where you take it out to the customer, where the door host will stand. But actually, in terms of what we're going to offer that customer, how the door host is going to behave, what the service style is going to be to make it unique, that bit hasn't been thought through. And it's only as we're nearing the end that becomes apparent, because you haven't had anybody with the brand in mind. Now you've had the property team who are actually building the site, but actually it's all of those intangible things that are going to create that experience. That's why it's so important to work.
The magic.
The magic, but it's it wouldn't work without the operations team. It wouldn't work without the marketing team. But it's bringing all of these different elements together, and obviously having a clear vision of what you're aiming for.
Yeah, I think even marketing has become the pulse and the heartbeat of a restaurant business, which wasn't the case earlier, or it was, but it was very different role, and it has evolved so much today that an operations team and everything that's happening with the technology and the real-time information that we have, marketing can really make a difference to translate that without even the customer knowing what they're going to experience, or the wow factor that we're always designing or conceptualizing to create that experience.
I think one of the reasons I wanted you to come along today and be part is really over the last year, seeing the work you've done with Culture King, I think is very interesting in lots of ways, but primarily because of you have taken a thought-focused and research-focused approach to that redevelopment. Do you want to talk through a little bit of how that came about and the work you've been doing?
Sure. With Culture King, it's an acquisition, so it was a very different story. It's not like when you're creating a brand from scratch that doesn't have any history. Here we had history. So, and we had challenges as well as much as we had the strengths in the historical past and really near historical past. So the approach that we took was really to understand, and just when you acquire, a lot of things are not told to you, or you need to really connect the dots. So that's where marketing played a very strong role, as to let's get the market intelligence. And with today's information and technology, all of that is so readily available. If the marketing team is strong enough to really analyze and have the time and the dedication and the passion to really put those things together and put the pieces of information together and really bring that to life. And that's exactly what we did with Culture King. We were really able to analyze the market intelligence as to what the consumers, because our consumers of the Culture King brand consumers were screaming out loud saying, guys, just give us what we want. We love the food that you're offering us, and all we want is just a little bit of change. We're not asking for too much, And every time we would go through this exercise, and a lot of focus groups that would come in, whether they were Arabs, non-Arabs, Western expats, Indians predominantly, they were the easiest to give us all the information. But there was so much interest and there was so much intrigue and, screaming out loud to say, marketing, you guys can do, you guys have put, the marketing played a very important role for Culture King to really put the brand out there, because historically there was a lot of outdoor that was put out in the media. So we had to really settle that down and convert that information that was already out there and the brand awareness that was so high at 91%, to really convert that into sales and say, okay, we've got that, we've achieved that now, but now let's use the intelligence to really bring in the experience, and that's how the whole brand transformed and took the shape that it's taken today.
I think your CEO presented for me very kindly on Monday, and he's here in the audience today, and he was talking about the amount of money that the previous owners were spending on above-the-line advertising was quite out there, wasn't it?
It was incredibly high, to the point where after the acquisition, we were so easily tempted to go out there and do the same, because the brand had reached a peak, and the footfall and the consumer response was phenomenal. So we've seen the highs, and the brand has seen the highs. So even when the management translated that, as soon as I came into the role, I knew the expectations are going to be very high. So from that aspect, we had to control a lot of that temptation and really use the intelligence. And we said today, real-time information. Back then, it was a little bit more difficult. It wasn't not available, but you need to have that approach, and you needed to not be conventional. You needed to be very forward and very savvy, technologically savvy, because today each one of our consumers have at least 2 phones. So it was very, very challenging to even have the management understand that, that's money, not really, you can't say it's wasted, but that there can be a better use of money when you actually use a real-time information to get marketing and reach out to the right people in the right manner and to really conceptualize your experience, and that's made a massive difference to the business. And it's so what we've done is we've not just rebranded Culture King, but we've actually are being more subtle with marketing, and it's all in the experience and in the way we've conceptualized, the whole experience. So I think that's where we really realized how marketing is the heartbeat and the pulse of any restaurant business, and it can really make a massive difference if we can really focus ourselves and give technology, the right to be able to give us that information, because it's very easy today to say, let's ignore that, because there's so many factors to it. It could be the fact that you don't, it's an investment already in the first place. And we've seen that with Freedom Pizza and a lot of other brands like Domino's and, even the retail brands that use this. But it's made a massive difference, Culture King, for sure. So we definitely know that's the way to go.
It strikes me that there's 2 potential challenges, really, when it does come to the new acquisition piece. One of which is you're just buying customers. And the second one is that you entice them with huge discounts. And I think we're particularly bad at that within casual dining, the latter one in the UK. And speaking to people here in the Middle East, it seems that the first may be something that's more prevalent here in terms of a lot of above-the-line advertising. Within your role, Lisa, it's very interesting that you've got kind of 2 dynamics going on. Within the travel hubs, you've already got your footfall, and it is much more about curating great brands and making sure they stand out in those environments. But then in the kind of franchising world, you're in an environment where it is about, you've got to work with your partners to create, not just to create, but also help them acquire new customers. How do you work that?
Yeah, so I guess with franchising, I'm taking all of the great work that our brand teams are doing, the understanding they've got of the audience, the understanding of the experience that they want to deliver, the different pricing and promotion packages they do. And then I guess it's my job to take them to our partners and help adapt them to the relevant countries, the relevant audience. I guess the beauty of that for the franchise partner is that a lot of the hard work is done. It's then about rolling it out in each of the countries. Whereas when I'm working with airports, first of all, I have to put the right concept to suit the right audience, but I've got the captive audience, so I'm not doing any footfall marketing. I'm not trying to get people into the site. The people are there. They're already there in the airport. But as James said, it's actually about giving them the best experience, because people have got high expectations. Their mindset can be sort of anxious. They're about to get on a plane. They're short of time. You have to give them the right experience, and they want to feel the brand like it is on the high street, but actually they might want it to be served quicker, or they might not want as much engagement with your team because they've got other things on their mind, they're about to get on a plane. So it's very much in the airports about making sure the brand is as close to what they see on the high street as possible, even though it's in a completely different environment. Yeah. Whereas, as you say, in terms of franchise, it's about replicating what we do on the high street, but in different countries, but also to suit partners' needs, because what they're trying to get out of the brand may be different, slightly different to what it possibly does in the UK.
In terms of the Middle Eastern market, what are you seeing working quite particularly well at the moment in terms of that kind of acquiring new customers and making sure that you get your messaging out there into the broader space?
It's a huge challenge because obviously there's such a broad offering and there's so much messaging going on. It boils down to the old word of mouth, which obviously extends today into the technology that was discussed the last couple of days. And when do you get word of mouth? You get it when you create an impact through the experience. You know, we've talked about this now the last couple of days extensively. So all that messaging starts with having your product right in the first place. So it really triggers multiple senses and an experience, and then people will start to talk about it. About messaging, how to get the message out there. You know, I'm not a marketing person myself. I'm not always fully aware of the latest technology. That's why we have you on the. But in essence, any positive message that comes from a trusted source will have an impact. When we sit sometimes in marketing meetings and we discuss on how many likes we need to buy on a certain channel. It kind of always sets me back, and it says, that doesn't sound right, you know, to pay somebody to like me, you know, because then I probably have done something very, very wrong in the beginning. So I always come back to what I said before. You know, if the product is right, if you really have worked very, very hard on the right product, adapted it to that location, to the market, then with the help of the technology that's out there, the message tends to spread quite quickly.
Much faster, real time.
And everybody in the team needs to understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you go in there and you create a new concept, and you know, it's so clear in your own mind, then you get everybody around the table. You know, your general manager, the service team, the chef, and you suddenly realize, oh, geez, the guys actually didn't get it, you know? And that's where branding teams are so incredibly helpful, because once you get a branding specialist at the table that really helps you to formulate the essence of what you're trying to do, and everybody is being given the opportunity to input, to talk about it and how they feel about what you're about to do. Suddenly you release tremendous energy, and we've gone through these processes a couple of times, and that translates, and that then carries on and sparks things all the way into the communication of the brand to the outside. So it's very, very important that you go through these processes.
Absolutely. I think we've moved a long way, we've come a long way from, you know, outdoor advertising and spending such big monies on media that we've actually seen. So when we took over and I came on board, the first thing I did was, okay, we're going to reverse the whole process, and it's going to be a shock to the system, to the employees, the servers. Everyone's so used to the fact that this brand has got so much hype, and they know this, you know, new marketing person has come on board, and she's going to go all out there and spend these outdoor budgets, and everything's going to be sorted, and the customer footfall is just going to flow in. So when we reversed, it was an absolute shock. And we actually, the first exercise that I did was get a group of bloggers, and they would be unique to every location, because every location has a community of its own. You know, we don't need celebrity bloggers, but we just need to have that relationship in that community.
Yeah, we had wonderful results with that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And it's not about buying likes anymore, and it's not about how many followers you have on Instagram anymore. It's all about the word of mouth, but it needs to come from the people after they've experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you go through the years, you know, I remember when I was a restaurant manager in a hotel in China many years ago. We didn't have phones, we didn't have email. I think the fax machine just came out. You know.
Sorry, what's a fax?
There was a fax machine. So you're the restaurant manager of a new place in town that nobody knew. So what do you do to get the message out, right? And I had a bit of extra time because my restaurant was a bit delayed in getting finished off. So I decided, I'm just going to go out and talk to people, right? So made cold calls to offices and brought them, I can't remember, even something small. You can't do this today anymore, but back then it was it was a surprise to everybody that a restaurant manager actually goes out there and talks to people about his product.
Actually, yeah, it's interesting you say you can't do that anymore. In the businesses I've been involved with, it's actually primary objective number one in our corporate environment is getting members of our team out and about on the ground and with food and office takeovers and all of that stuff is really
Problem we have with that is we actually physically can't get into the office buildings with that sort of thing. You know, it's almost like, what do you call it? You almost sneak past and have to sneak past the security guards, you know, to
bribe
get to
them
the offices. You
with
know?
a lot of food.
Exactly.
I was going to say,
really difficult.
They say there's no such thing as a free lunch. Well, if you offer someone it, and often they can be.
But what I'm trying to say is, if you look at the evolution of messaging and how to get the message out over the years, and then we had the fax machine, and wow, great thing. So you send faxes to all of your guys about the next thing you're doing in your restaurant and the next promotion and this and that. And it worked for a while, and then everybody did it, and it died, right? It became inefficient. Email was shortly afterwards the next thing. We thought it was the holy grail of communication. We'll send out, we send out emails to corporate, and this still happens until today. It's the first thing I delete in the morning when I get into the office.
It's interesting though, because in all of we did a huge survey in January, and the most effective communication method within the European, in terms of conversion, within the European sector for marketing was by far email, by about 4 times.
But that was in the past, I presume.
No, right now.
It still is.
And almost certainly within the brands that I've worked with most closely, in terms of trackable actual return, it's still been it's very, very
It's
powerful.
still relevant, okay. No, but didn't work for us in the in the individual restaurant initiatives that we did. So then it all boils down to where it all starts for me. That's what I'm saying, word of mouth, personal interaction.
That's the oldest and the
it's the oldest and
tested.
the most tested and the most relevant form,
I think if
you offer an experience.
If you pull it back to strategy, though, and it's interesting that, to me, you've got to know your metrics. One of the first things that I think marketers have to do is get to grips with all the key metrics of the business, and they've got to take responsibility for top-line revenue, full stop. And actually, that's where the problem around fluffiness comes from in terms of colouring in department, is marketers traditionally do not take that responsibility, and you have to. And actually, you can't talk about these bullshit metrics of Facebook likes and email opens and so on. That's the very, very bottom of it. The next one up is conversions. It's about actually what are we seeing in terms of conversions to online bookings and so on. And then the top line is absolute revenue. It's what is a site doing? And I think that you've got to be very careful in that initial stage not to get too sewn up with your messaging. Get that stuff done, get it agreed, and then move on. To me, there's 4 key ways that you can make money as a restaurant business, and it's only 4. You can acquire new customers, you can get existing customers coming back more often, and a lot of the loyalty stuff, although I think loyalty as a concept is wavering. It's much more about the experience and the broader piece. The third one is about driving more efficiency within your venue, so making sure that you get quicker throughput, and it's actually one of the biggest challenges I face is spending time with operators, understanding that we turn tables quicker at peak times. Frankly, I can drive as much of the top line as I want in terms of the new customer. If we don't get them through, that's a challenge. And the fourth one is getting them spending more. When I'm sitting down with anybody, they are absolutely the 4 key pillars that we're working to in terms of our sales strategy, and it's underpinned by a branding strategy. It's literally all we've got time for, but again, we're breaking shortly, and I'm sure my panel will be delighted to take questions at the break. So thank you so much for your time, and thanks for joining me here on stage.
Thank you.